Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 777, Rich and I are joined by an old friend of the show, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We've got the new Raspberry Pi 400. Rich is very excited about that. We've got some Windows Insider news, new builds, but losing features. We'll explain probably why that is. We've got some smart home news, future Windows 10, Windows 10X, lots more. So let's get straight to Rich. Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
And anybody watching the screen will see the GW on our team session. Good evening, Garry.
Good evening. I'm back.
You're back. Well, really good to have you back. We've missed your input in many ways. So it's really good to you managed to get you on the show tonight. So we're very glad to have you back. And there's lots of things we wanted to talk about actually, and I know you were keen on. But the first is something that Richard was dying to talk about. He said that there'll be something interesting coming out that I want to buy, and he wasn't wrong. So there's a new Raspberry Pi.
Well, there's an older Raspberry Pi, but it's in a brand spanking new case. Well, it's a little bit quicker, I guess, than ordinary Pi. So yes, this is the Raspberry Pi 400, which I gather has been named in honor of the old 8-bit computers of the 1980s, your Atari 400s or whatever else you had 464. And yeah, this is basically they've taken the current official Pi keyboard, made it a little bit wider, and they've shoved what's effectively a Raspberry Pi 4 into it. A 4 gigabyte Raspberry Pi 4. So you've basically got a standalone computer and a keyboard, which has been done before with the Pis. I mean, I've seen people stick Pi Zeros inside the official keyboard, for example. This, of course, is an official unit from the Raspberry Pi team, and I gather it's been lurking around for a good few years in Raspberry Pi 3 guys, but they've actually released it now, just in time for lockdown number 2 in the UK. So you've got a thing to play with now, and it's I've been playing with it for a little while, and I have to say it's a generally impressive bit of kit. But obviously the keyboard it's not going to be a wonderful mechanical keyboard thing. It is the ordinary Raspberry Pi official keyboard, which is fine. And as I said, I used it as a prime machine for a week, and it was fine. It's a little bit different to the Raspberry Pi 4 that we know about. It goes a bit faster. It goes at 1.8 gigahertz now, which is up from, I think, is it 1.5, Garry, on the Pi 4?
1.5, I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
So they've done something about the heatsink.
Well, they have. They've basically got inside it. It's still passively cooled, but it's got a hulking great heatsink in there. Effectively, the whole width of the keyboard is one massive aluminium heatsink. I was given the order to try and overheat it if I could, and I mean, using Raspberry, and it was fine. The Ubuntu Groovy Gorilla 20.10 came out in official guise as well, and that has got a desktop version that runs under the Pi 400, and that does make things a bit warm, I have to say. But on the whole, the cooling I thought was better than the Pi 4 for sure. I've no doubt people will run some heavy duty compute tasks on it and cause it to overheat. But on the whole, I found it fine. I had no problems with it whatsoever. You're also lacking some ports as well. Unfortunately, you've got 2 USB 3, but only 1 USB 2 port on this. And I think on the Pi 4 you have 2 USB 2 ports. You've also got slightly different firmware as well, which means it may not work on all distributions. I found a few problems with a few things that worked on the Pi 4. Like when I tried it out, Risk OS, for example, worked well on the Pi 4, didn't work properly on this. And I think that's because the firmware is slightly different. I know, for example, it's got a different radio, for example, to what's in the Pi 4. It shares the radio with the Pi, with the computer module 4, which came out. So I'm throwing out all kinds of model names here, so I do apologize. But otherwise, everything else is pretty much as you would expect in a Pi 4. They've reoriented all the ports. The ports are now on the back. You've got the 40-pin GPIO header, that's still there. You've got 2 micro HDMI ports. The micro SD, it's now a spring-loaded micro SD card slot. And yeah, it works surprisingly well. I mean, unfortunately, it is limited to 4 gigabytes. I think it's a shame they didn't do an 8 gigabyte version, since it is an 8 gig version of the Pi 4. I also think it's a crying shame they didn't take the chance to somehow make it upgradable via a compute module, because as you know, they've changed the form factor of the compute module, and this is crying out to have that be somehow slottable into it, if you know what I mean. Because it kind of, if you open it up, the gut of it looks like the development board you can get for the compute module. So you think, well, they could perhaps have found some way of making that work, which I think is a shame. But that's nitpicking on my part. I think for the majority of people, it's actually a very, very good unit. It comes in 2 guises. You can get the 70 I think it's about 69, 70 pound, including VAT version, and that's basically just the keyboard with a Pi inside. Or you can go for the, I mean, it's about 95, 96 pounds, including VAT, and that will get you the keyboard, the video cable, the mouse, the power supply, a very, very good beginner's manual, and also an SD card to boot up from, which I think is probably the version I'd recommend most people get. And the reason for that is that HDMI cable, because it's got two micro HDMI ports. But the killer with that is that's a very unusual socket size, which, for example, if you're opening up one of these things under the tree at Christmas time, you're going to want to plug it in and try it out. And I guarantee you that unless you're an enthusiast, you're not going to have that cable in the house. I think so. It's a real shame they didn't go back to the full-size HDMI ports. But I mean, there are good technical reasons why they couldn't. I just think it's a bit of a shame, because mainly because of that, I'd say go for the 95, 96 pound pack if this is your thing, because it's a ready to go machine, and well, I mean, I was very impressed with it, really.
It certainly does take me back to the old style computers of the 80s with the single board in there, and even that edge connector reminds me of the Spectrum edge connector, not quite as as fragile, but it does remind me of it where it's placed.
Yes. The CEO of the Raspberry Pi Foundation, Eben Upton, did laugh that perhaps they should include some blue tack as well to get that real retro feel. Although again, just pointing out the interface slot, the GPIO, which is one of the great things about the Pi. You can use that GPIO interface to do all kinds of things. You can get a sort of an attachment cable for that, because obviously on the Pi 4, the GPIO is oriented differently to how it is here. So there's a K cable which you can plug in to make anything you've got that plugs into the GPIO slots the correct orientation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for £3.50, which isn't bad, really.
It's not bad at all. No, not bad at all. So, but really, for the majority of people, I think, as you say, it made me flash right back to the 1980s, where you'd buy machines, and the computer was in the keyboard. It'd be your Spectrum or your Commodore. And I have to say, I have been spending more time than I should on my day off creating SD card images for each of the favorite machines of my youth. So there's a BBC micro SD card, there's a TI-99 booting SD card, there's all these various things which I'm working on, and because it's just nice to pop the card in, you turn it on, and boom, up it comes. So I know that's perhaps not what they're intending it to be used for, but it's certainly what I've been doing with it. It's generally a good little machine. I'd recommend it, definitely.
So I'm waiting for the Raspberry Pi 1040 ST. I'll be there.
With a MIDI port.
In the MIDI port, yeah. Of course, you could quite easily put a MIDI port onto a Raspberry Pi 400. That would not be difficult at all.
Absolutely, you've got USB and GPIO, so where you go, knock yourself out. Yes, I mean certainly. I mean, I unfortunately I couldn't get RISC OS to boot on it. At least not the version I had from last week, the 528 version. But I mean, RISC OS, the Archimedes operating system, when I on a Raspberry Pi 4 is a thing of awesome and splendor, because it's all the toys you wish you had before, a high resolution, lots of colors, and it's it does make you flashback wonderfully. But yes, so it's I think this is a really good machine. This is sounding very, I'm enthusing a bit too much, aren't I, really? But it's one of those things you pair it on, and everything just worked. Everything worked, and I was able to use it for a week as my primary machine. Didn't miss a beat, at all. It was fine. I used a Chromium browser on it. I used Raspbian. I used Ubuntu 2010. The only time it struggled really, I'd say, was when I was doing some particularly hardcore things in Ubuntu 2010, where I thought it could really have used the extra 4 gig, the 8 gig of RAM as headroom for desktop stuff. But certainly Raspbian is tuned specifically for this low end spec. So it worked really well. And as I say, if you've got any interest at all in doing this, doing some hobbyist things or learning how other OSs work, I think you'd be hard pressed to go wrong getting one of these things.
Excellent.
Yeah. I like the. I noticed they put it on the blog post, but I like the fact all the USB ports are on the left-hand side, which is the correct side for us left-handers.
Well done. Yes, that is correct. I must admit, I hadn't noticed that. You're quite right. They haven't they?
Yeah. So it works perfectly for me. It looks really fun. And I've got a couple of Pis, and I've got my little display things. But I like the idea. I did have a look on. I can't remember which of the Raspberry Pi official sites that were selling them. I think it was the Pi Hut. I think they basically sold out of them all.
Yeah, I mean, they made about 75,000 to start with, and they were just going to see how well it went. I mean, I think they were pretty confident it would go well, but I think they've been taken aback, much like with the 8 gig Pi and the 4 gig Pi, about how well it's gone.
Yeah.
I ordered my one. I mean, I obviously had a review unit as well, but those get sent back. But I ordered mine on the day of release and did get hold of one. So I'm quite pleased with that.
If anybody wants one and gets in quick, because I suspect by the time we're back, actually published, it may have gone out of stock again. But the Pi Hut just got some in stock today.
Yeah.
So.
That's right. I mean, as I say, they did make quite a lot, and I can't remember the keyboards. There's obviously UK, US. I think are the key keyboards from day one. The other thing as well, for any listeners for whom English is not the first language, they've also translated that beginner's guide as well, which I think is the first for them. So they really are targeting the worldwide.
So you can
market.
get German, French, Spanish, and Italian, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I know going to they're looking at doing the likes of Hebrew as well at some point in the future. So, but yes, very little wrong with it, to be honest. I mean, obviously, don't expect it to be a wonderful, slick, incredibly fast bit of kit, because it's not. It's Pi 4, so be aware of what you're buying. But it's going to do the majority of things that you need it to do, unless you're really into 3D PC gaming. It's going to work. And the joy of the SD card is that, of course, you can have as many OSs as you like and just change the SD card around. Bear in mind with SD cards and the Pi, it is worth mentioning, a bit of health warning, they do fail after a while.
Yeah, as mine did. And in fact,
you
know what, I was on the show saying one of mine wasn't working last week. I did mention that. I don't know if they'll see this, but I can probably see why. It's in 2 pieces.
That's not good. That's gone badly.
That's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, that would do it. I was going to say, I mean, what you can do is, I've not tried it with the Pi 400 yet, but obviously you can plug in an SSD as well. I think the firmware might even be in the Pi 400. I know it was an update for the earlier Pis, which will allow you to boot from a USB SSD and things, which is an alternative to using the SD card.
Yeah. So the other thing you can do is you can get some of the high quality, well, not the high quality, but the high resilient SD cards, which are designed for photography.
Yeah.
Because they're designed to be able to turn on and off without loss of and destruction, which but they are substantially more expensive than a standard SD card. So.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've not got much bad things to say about it, really. I mean, you've got the Ethernet ports.
Yeah, I'm going to look at one of the I think the 67 pound one, because I was going to get the other one, but I've got USB-C chargers coming out of me ears. I've got that micro HDMI cable, which I've had for a while. So I mean, actually, probably perfect for me. That
you should be fine. I mean, obviously with the Pi 4, you need to, with USB-C chargers, you got to make absolutely sure you've got the right chargers, because there seems to be standards upon standards upon standards. And I know Garry has also had experience as well with the joy of USB-C connections. So bear in mind that. And as I say, check the micro HDMI cable if you've already got a Pi 4.
I have got a Pi 4 anyway that works. That I've used the cable, so I guess it's the same. Yeah.
I like the way you've stuck on the IP address there. Yeah, that's.
Oh, that's not even stuck on. This is Gary's recommendation. That is.
Oh, I see. Is it a screen? Oh,
yes.
That's cool. So is that some kind of so that's an e-ink of the IP address.
Yeah, I wrote a program.
That is neat.
In whatever I can't remember what I wrote it in now, but one of the default languages in there, it's Python, isn't it?
Yeah.
That queries the IP address and shows you there. So it's very just DHCPs and shows you on there. And if there's no network, it says no network. And of course it's e-ink, but I can power it off. But if you ever have problems with DHCP or something, just plug that in and it'll give you the IP address. And it's handy because then I've enabled remote desktop, so I don't need to plug it into a display.
And of course, with that, that plugs into the GPIO pins. So for that, you'd probably really need to have that additional cable that Garry mentioned as well to attach that. But that's neat. Ian. I like that.
Yeah, it's a really clever idea using e-ink. I do that all the time now with all sorts of system things, especially on the home automation side. I've basically got the home automation status sitting on the Pi Ink display. Which is
Yeah, it's a nice little thing, because if you don't want to connect a monitor up and you want to use the remote desktop, then you can see the DHCP address without firing up a monitor or scanning your network. But I find it quite handy for testing DHCP. Yeah,
and mine also tells me when the network goes down. So if the internet goes down, which it has been doing quite regularly around this area recently, it'll tell you when it, because obviously it's e-ink, so it doesn't go away. You can see when it last was connected.
Yeah, handy little tool. So yeah, I think I'm probably going to get one of the 67 ones, and then just I've already got all the cables and chargers and everything, and it's ready to go then.
I'll probably put one on my Christmas list. That'd be good.
yeah, that's a good idea, that. Yeah, I think there'll be plenty of them on Christmas list, I would imagine.
Yes, well, as Garry said, order soon, because they do seem to be selling well, and based on the experience of the other Raspberry Pi 4s, they do seem to sell out quite quickly.
Yeah, nice little device, and it's British company. I know we're a worldwide podcast, but it's nice every now and again to support it.
Exactly. I should point out it is assembled, I think, in the old Sony factory in Wales, I think, isn't it?
Yep. Yes, I think it is. I think it is. Isn't it where they built some C5s as well at some point around there?
Well, you're the Sinclair guy, so I'll defer to you.
Well, that was an old washing machine factory, I think, and it's somewhere in Wales. I think it's a very similar area anyway.
Yeah.
Talk about a C5. I don't know if I mentioned the show. I actually had a chance to ride in one about a few months back.
Wow.
It's one of the last remaining ones in the country. It was really cool, actually.
Still working, crikey.
Still working, but he's changed the battery on it, to be fair. The battery's the other thing that goes. So it's now an upgraded lithium-ion battery in it. But which means it can actually go up hills, which was obviously always the issue, but without draining the battery completely. But yeah, very cool. And you could see why they weren't popular at the time. I mean, but now you think, maybe something like that would do quite well.
Yes, I mean, it would work well in a bike lane, wouldn't it? It was when they were trying to use it on actual roads. It was pretty alarming stuff. But yes, I saw one actually the weekend at the Bewley Motor Museum, and they had one there, which I did flashback. But it's good to know that they're still rolling.
Yeah, it is. I think the all that Sinclair, that 80s boom in technology was really interesting, and I know we've mentioned before the Micro Men film. That's if you're ever interested in that sort of 80s boom of technology, is well worth watching. Also, there's a Netflix documentary, if you're more like the gaming side, that we talked about a few months ago, but that's quite interesting. I think Sky have got one as well about console wars.
Yes, I mean, I found the Sky one a little bit too US and Japan centric. There wasn't an awful lot about, all the UK software houses, of which there were lots. I think it was sad that they kind of got missed out. There's perhaps another story to be told about UK game software houses like Ocean and what have you.
Rockstar. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's a thing to put on the Christmas list. That I think the Raspberry Pi.
I guarantee you won't regret it.
Yeah, and I'll get it set up. I did try with my Raspberry Pi. I've got that one working with the Spectrum, the Bluetooth Spectrum keyboard as well. So actually, using Fuse and the Bluetooth Spectrum keyboard actually turns this Raspberry Pi into a nice little Spectrum emulator.
Oh, cool. I mean, I was in the process of taking one of my scrap TI-99 consoles and fitting a Pi inside it, but I got as far as the Arduino connection for the TI-99 keyboard, and everything went horribly wrong at that point because it involved soldering, and me and soldering don't get on well, sadly.
Yeah, that's the problem with that. It seems a good idea, and as I thought about that when the Pi first came out, getting an old Spectrum, but then you're getting that edged rubber connecting things that comes from the Spectrum keyboard. I don't know how you'd wire that up. I know people have done it with Arduinos, but it's not something of a short 5-minute job.
It's really not, no. And of course, as I said, with old ham hands here, it didn't go well.
Yeah, soldering is definitely not my scheme, especially when it comes to surface mount stuff. That's
wow, no, I'm not going near that one at all. Luckily, I think most of the computers of the early '80s, surface mount wasn't really a thing then, was it?
No, I mean that's where the little Spectrum Bluetooth keyboard, which I have here actually. So this is a USB or Bluetooth, so it works either way.
Does that count as an unboxing video there, Ian?
Yeah. So this has got a USB port, or you can use Bluetooth, and then you get Fuse on here, and just put them together. And in fact, I could maybe stick that on there like that, and I've got my Spectrum with my Edge connector. But yeah, that's
old tape deck. Stick inside an old tape deck stuck on the outside.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, make it look like the tape, like a Boots tape deck.
Yeah, and obviously you'll need to have the audio on boot up.
Yeah, that's a very good. I've got a micro drive up there. I could probably fit it in a micro drive.
Yeah,
probably would fit inside a micro drive. Oh, the nostalgia. Then all you'll do is play Match Day on it anyway. But moving slightly then further up to date, we did get some Windows Insider builds last week, and for about 20H2, Garry, you haven't been on since they released 20H2 actually, but 20H2's out, and but there's been another update for Windows Insiders on Release Preview and the Beta channel.
Yes, this time roughly the same time, I think, because obviously there was a slight odd timing last time. Yes, this time I think it's gone to both, and it's 19042.610, and it's just one fix now. And that came out. Was that last week that came out? I think.
Yeah.
And all that does is fix an issue around Docker, from what I can tell, where the which was obviously quite a major thing if you are using Docker, because it could cause the pull operation to fail, which was quite bad. But I think obviously it affects a niche number of users, and it was caused by a code integrity policy which blocked the import of a Windows container image. So again, the vast majority of users wouldn't have been affected by it, but it's good to know it's been fixed.
Yeah, it is, and I guess this will end up amongst other fixes in the Patch Tuesday.
Exactly, which is as it should be. You'd expect those things to be tested in the release preview ring and then be pushed out via patches, which is
which makes sense.
The system's working correctly.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the fast ring or the dev channel in a minute, but first, Garry, have you got the 20H2 installed?
Yep, I think I've got that on 2 of my devices now. Primarily the dev ones, which I obviously need it on for doing certain things. But yeah, works well.
Yeah, a cleaner update. I do like, especially if you're using, if you let the transparent icons and everything, the theme aware icons.
Where people have implemented them.
Yeah, which are getting better. The one that really stands out is the Surface Audio one. Everything else is all nice, and I'm just looking at my Surface Go here. Everything looks okay, apart from the Surface Audio, which is a big silver box, but the rest look okay. So yeah, it's been quite a nice update. But last week they gave us another build on the dev channel, and they took all our toys away.
They did indeed, yes. We've been whinging for a while now, saying, "Oh, there's not much in the dev channel." Just it's like not much comes out in dev channel today. It all went. It's like, well, there we go. It's gone.
Stop complaining. We're going to take it away.
Exactly. I mean, I'm hopeful that means we're going to see that stuff now start to appear in the beta channel, because they've begun to change branches around as they move to the next phase of development, I presume. And so they've shifted, excuse me, to the FE release branch, which means we're kind of working on a different cut of the code, which doesn't include all the things we've seen, like the theme aware splash screens and the emoji keyboard and voice typing and other bits and pieces of nonsense. They've all gone. I guess they'll gradually start to come back in. But of course, the thing about the dev channel is the build you're working from. There's no guarantee any of that will ever get released anyway.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So we're now on what is our current experimental build. So I would expect this is a sign that the beta channel, which should in theory start seeing things which are going to be in 21H1, I would hope, we should start seeing stuff going in there that maybe we'll start to acquire things which we'd previously seen in the dev channel. I'm hoping that's what this all means. But again, as usual, they've been relatively obtuse about it all. But the immediate thing is build 20246 on the dev channel. Took away most of the new features that have been introduced over the last few weeks, and also quite sadly, they're also going to take away the preview of the calendar app and go back to the old one as well, which I think is a shame.
Yeah, quite like the
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm not sure how many people really use it, but it is a shame to see it, being taken away, and they're going back to the classic one, in order to give my quote the best calendar experience possible, which would be don't use a calendar. Would be my suggestion for that. There's many other alternatives that are far better. I mean, one thing that was good actually in the dev channel, which again, it's a niche thing, but if you use it, you'll appreciate it, is the automatic Linux distribution installation for the Windows subsystem for Linux. But that again is more of a developer thing. So it hits me, but I'm not sure how many other people really care that much about it, because, or at least as much as I care about WSL. So yeah, that's the thing here. But I don't know. Do you think this is a sign that we're going to see some, more 21H1 things appearing in the beta channel soon?
Yeah, I think so. I think because they did this in May, didn't they? After the May update, the dev channel went on the release branch for a while and then switched back to pre-release. And I think this is probably a way of getting the beta channel ready, so that the beta channel will get this branch and build, and then the dev channel will switch back to pre-release, and we'll start to see those features getting checked back in again, and then we'll see the features. So I think this is preparing the ground for 21H1, which is looking like a minor update from what we're hearing from various people. So maybe this is the case now. So they get this stable sort of underlying code. This gets pushed to beta, and then we get some of the features back in. And as we've seen, they can add features quite late in the development process now. The Skype Meet Now or something like that, that was added. That was in the dev channel and then added to release preview pretty quickly. So they can have these features switched on and off pretty easily now. So I think it's the underlying code, the sort of the kernel type stuff, isn't it, that is probably more difficult to switch in and out. So that gets shoved into beta, and then they switch the features on and off from the top. So I think that's what will happen, yeah. And I think we'll start to see what could potentially be a much bigger update for Windows 10 next year, and we'll start to see some of those features soon hit the dev channel, and we'll see 21H1 shifted to beta channel. So I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The rumors of the 20, what would be 21H2. I mean, there's a few, is that there isn't going to be 2 updates to Windows 10 next year. There's just going to be one big one later in the year, which slightly contradicts this idea that they're shoving stuff onto beta. But maybe that's what will happen, is we'll get a very minor update, a cumulative update in first half of next year, and then we'll get this bigger update towards the end of next year. And the rumors are that there's going to be quite a few visual changes with that.
Yes, there are rumors circulating that there'll be a fairly major user interface overhaul, perhaps lifting more things from Windows. From what we've seen of Windows 10X coming around the autumn again. I think they probably need to be clear about what's happening, because those of us who have to deploy Windows 10 we've gotten quite used now to the last 2 years where it's worked well. You would have major, then minor, then major, then minor. So they're looking at what they're going to do. We've had minor, we might have another minor, and they might have a major. So we're kind of swapping things around. So it'd be good to know what's actually happening there for sure. At the moment, it's all information being floated by people in the know or people who've said something, but nothing official from Microsoft yet. Well, from what I've seen, it looks very nice. But yeah, I don't know why you'd need to wait for that long to polish up the interface that much, to be honest. But maybe there's more things from Windows 10X under the hood that we don't know about yet.
They may well be.
And with that, the 2 Windows Insiders the 2 Windows MVPs went very quiet at that point. Wow.
If we knew, well, if there was anything we could even talk about, then we would. But actually, it's I would say they're not telling many people about their plans for Windows for next year yet.
Exactly.
I think they're being very cautious with that.
I mean, there's a lot of things one can deduce just by looking at what's happened thus far. You can certainly see there'll be some Windows 10X interface influences making their way in. I just can't see how that can justify a wait till next October, because their visuals, and they've spent a lot of time pulling the the UI, the start menu and other desktop elements away from the kernel again. So I don't see why that would take that long to deliver that level of polish. So I'm hoping there's something else happening under the hood. And that's also what I'm hoping, because we've seen so few things in the dev channel of any real interest. Things like theme-aware splash screens. Yeah, it looks nice, but I'm pretty sure. I hope that there's things happening under the hood around containerization, around isolation. To bring some of the things which I'm very excited about Windows 10X into the main Windows 10 branch. But I guess we'll have to see. It's all. Maybe we'll learn more at Build.
We probably will.
Yeah, it does seem like they don't want to talk about Windows 10X anyway at the moment.
No, they don't, do they?
Because it's been so long since we had that. Those initial, we had 2 or 3 builds. I think we're back when we took pre-lockdown, were we? February, March, something like that, when we had those first builds, and then nothing since then. So I know that they told us that they're focusing on single screen experiences, but we could quite easily test that through the emulator.
You don't get to hear anything about 10X unless you're on that particular flight group, and if you're part of the flight club, you don't talk about flight club.
Bravo, well done, nicely played, sir. Yes, I mean certainly the 10X emulation versions kind of disappeared around the same time as it became clear that Neo was not going to ship anytime soon. Yeah. So
I'm certain there's a few internal people who've got it, but it's
and I think that the rumours of that is that it's going to ship first half of next year, with the devices coming later on in the year. So maybe that's they're just getting ready to to talk about it when everything's ready.
Yes, I've seen a few stories, again, all unfounded rumor from what I can tell, that there are issues with backwards compatibility, and it may not even have any backwards compatibility.
Yes, that's what I've seen. Yeah, and they pulled is it the Veil component?
Yeah, which I think that would be. I hate to say the word disastrous, but that's been one of the.
It'd be disastrous.
Well,
going on the Surface RT side of things.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it's a case of.
Again.
Yeah, I mean, I like. We did have a bit of a loving about the Surface RT last week, but it's one of those things where you look at that experience, you think, well, that was great technically, and I thought it was fantastic, but of course. The one thing about Windows, if you brand a thing with Windows, people expect their Windows apps to work, and there's still a lot of Windows apps out there that require.
I guess the one thing which is probably in its favour now is that the biggest failing for RT was that it didn't run iTunes, and there's a lot less people running iTunes these days. So.
Yeah, the question is, will 10X run Chrome? That's the next thing.
It won't Chromium.
Yeah.
Well. We'll see. Yeah, we're supposed Edge. Yeah, that's true. Edgeium.
Yeah. I guess Microsoft have talked about the single screen version of Windows 10X because of the change in the world landscape at the moment. Does anybody complain about not being able to install apps and iTunes or on a Chromebook?
Yes. I'm getting constant. My cousin's got one, and she's constantly emailing me. I can't run this. How do I get around this problem? I mean, the big thing on Chrome at the moment, I don't know if this has been mentioned on the show, is a lot of printers is going to stop working at the end of the year with Chromebooks. A lot of old HPs, well, actually not even that old HPs, a couple of year old HPs are suddenly going to stop working on the Chromebooks as printing devices. So that's causing a lot of consternation out there at the moment.
What's the reason for that?
They've changed the compatibility layer, so the manufacturers have got to keep up basically, and they're not taking the investment because, I mean, how many Chromebooks are out there?
Yeah, and printer manufacturers aren't exactly known for keeping up to date with drivers. If you remember the Vista, back to the Vista days. Yeah.
So that's a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, Chromebooks are an interesting device. I mean, I'm not going to name the company that sent this to because that would be a bit unfair. But I was offered a review code for some Chromebook software, and I was told that I could only look at it if the Chromebook met the recommended system requirements of, and I quote, an Intel i5 or i7 processor, 16 gigs of memory, and a 1 to 8 gigabyte SSD. And I thought, wow, Chromebooks, eh? That's not a Chromebook anymore. That's become something else.
There's only was it the Google one that did that, or was it the Samsung one? But it was really expensive.
Yeah, But by that point, you think, well, this is defeating the point of a Chromebook, surely.
Yeah, and which is what Microsoft are trying to go, I think, with Windows 10 X, aren't they, to make it low cost, simple, and cheap, and sounds familiar, I know.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, my hope with Windows 10X was always was always along the lines of the container stuff. We could run things in isolation, and which was where I was hoping they were going to go. But I don't think you can run that necessarily on a low end machine. You look at something like, say, the Surface Laptop Go, that couldn't cope with that kind of stuff. You need to have a decent bit of kit. So we shall see. Interesting time around build. Hopefully. I mean, I expected to learn something around Ignite, but there was nothing. So, in fact, it was actually quite, I don't know, conspicuous by its absence. Really, there was just nothing about it. So, I think if you get to build and there's still nothing, then we may have to start talking about the fact it's yet another cancelled project. I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't think it is, but at this stage, but I'm optimistic. But we'll see the proofs in the pudding when they actually deliver a device to run in it.
Yeah.
Right. What else did we have for this week? Oh, just one thing for smart home users, and particularly the Amazon device. Amazon actually updated their Windows app last week, and it's actually quite usable now and quite useful. The initial version, which is nearly 2 years old now, UWP app allowed you to do the voice control, but that was it really. It was very basic, but the new version is pretty much feature parity with the iOS and Android version. Well, certainly Android. I haven't tried the iOS version, but certainly the Android version. So you can do all the smart home things in there. You can do drop-in video calls as well. And it's actually quite a nice looking app. Like I said, it looks very much like the Android one now, but it really gives you all the features that you would have with the app or with the device on a Windows 10 PC, including the always on listening if you want, with the wake words and everything else, and video calling. So if you're a Windows user and a Amazon smart home user, then it's well worth having a look at the new app.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? I only discovered yesterday it updated. I haven't really used my PC much for the last few weeks, and yeah, that's really impressive. It's got that.
Yeah, it looks nice. It's got that nice sort of polished UI.
I think definitely having the common stuff in there is a huge improvement that you didn't have before, and the whole ability to do announcements and everything else. That's really good.
I bet there's a lot of people though with the Amazon devices and a Windows device, and just don't realise that you can actually link them together and do that. It's a shame that there isn't more surfacing of those features and those capabilities from the Amazon ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, just an update on the I'll get on with the Duo. Quick update. Still my primary device. So still SIM cards in there. Yeah, still very happy with it. Working really well. It's very nice to have the 2 seat screens side by side, I must admit, and it still feels like a device from the future, or like maybe it was in Westworld or something like that. But I'm actually starting to get used to it now, and I'm switched back to working from home at the moment, and it's really good for working from home. It's great for Teams calls as well. I did some Teams calls. I think I mentioned last week I did them as well. But in this sort of laptop mode with the camera on there, people commenting on how good the camera quality is. Or when I was on a Teams call. So the camera has got a lot of negativity for the pictures, which is pretty fair. But for Teams calls, it actually works really well. So it's a nice little device for that. The only thing I've found is you just have to get used to doing the actions to flip the camera around and things like that. But for work stuff, it's brilliant because you can have your Teams call there and you can have the chat there, or you can have do it that way and have the Teams call there and the chat bit there, and it's really a good a really good way of working, and I think it's one of those things where once you start using dual screens and get used to dual screens, when you go to a single screen phone, it feels a bit strange. And what feels really strange, something like using the Note, is the tall thin screen feels wrong now. It feels even in single screen mode, I do prefer that widescreen. So maybe we'll see some new form factors of phones, maybe going to a slightly wider form factor. We shall wait and see. Did you get one of the new iPhone 12, Richard? Were you thinking of getting a new one or getting hold of one?
No, and I'll tell you why. It's because of Face ID. At the moment, with the way things are in the world, I think anyone buying a phone that's only got Face ID and no fingerprint access is mad. I mean, to be blunt about it, because I don't see there's anything on the iPhone 12 that merits the upgrade. I mean, it's got a nice camera and things, it's faster, but ultimately, I need the phone to be unlockable, and I don't want to have to key in a six or digit pin or 4-digit pin or whatever to get into my phone. I want it to work, and the iPhone doesn't do that anymore. At least not the expensive ones. The cheap one does.
I wonder if at this upcoming One More Thing event they've announced that if they're going to announce that one more thing, Face ID now works with masks.
Yeah, but I guess so. I mean, we'll see.
It could do. I mean, if you could, in terms of if you actually look at the whole face recognition thing, you could use the points of the eye to make up the 18 points you need.
You would have to do it, yeah. I mean, you have to go purely by eye, definitely, because obviously the mask can change the face's shape quite easily. So possibly. I mean, I just think just go back to using a thumbprint. I mean, they've done it with the iPad. They put it on the power button. I think they're just. It's almost as though there's. I mean, I know obviously the hardware has got a long lead time, so there is an issue with hardware. There seems to be some kind of stubbornness with Apple. They have to make this Face ID thing work, and I mean, even before the mask time, I wasn't a fan of it. It just, I'd have the phone lying down on the table, and I'd have to look at it to make it work, and it was inconvenient, and it just seemed to be there purely as some kind of artificial differentiator. I'm not convinced by it then, and right now the mask wearing, I'm really not convinced by it compared to other ways of doing biometric security.
Yeah, it's still got to be better than the fingerprint recognition on the Galaxy S10.
Which
is awful.
Do you mean the thing through the screen?
Yeah,
that's terrible. Yeah,
I re-mold my fingerprints virtually every week on it. It's crazy.
I've tried that. No, I mean my old S10e. Sorry, S10 is it S10? I think it's S10e. That's got the fingerprint on the power button, and that works fine. And also on the Duo, again, same principle. Works very fast. So. But
to be fair, I suppose the Note 20 has the fingerprint on the front on the screen there, and it says no. Yeah, I never had no issues with that really.
I think until just now.
Yeah, of course.
I think the S20's actually got a better reader. I think that seems to be the S10 is
the one on the side. Actually, I still think works better because you hold it with your thumb.
Yeah,
my thumb is always where the fingerprint reader. It works brilliantly for that, and I think that's the same on some of the other the older Samsung ones.
Yes, I mean, I've got a last generation S10, and that's not the side, and it works a treat. It works very well. Although to be fair, my wife, she has an iPhone SE which has the fingerprint reader on the central button, and again, that's where your thumb tends to get used to falling on an iPhone anyway. So, and it works really well. So. I just wish Apple would find somewhere bringing that back, because as it stands, any phone that depends on that is just a no-go, because I don't know at what point I'm not going to be wearing a mask anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, isn't it? Certainly
well, it is.
Next generation phone.
It certainly is. And I think it's I do wonder if there's some kind of stubbornness inside Apple that says we have to have Face ID on everything, or else. So I don't know. It is a strange one.
Yeah.
If only Jason was here, he would know, wouldn't he? And he'd defend it too.
I mean, the Lumia 950 Windows Hello used eye recognition, didn't it? Because when you calibrated that, you had it so it looked at just
Retina,
this region of it. Yeah.
Which is great unless you had glasses on, especially if you had varifocal glasses, and then it had no chance.
Yeah, and you also.
I was going to say,
also had to hold it like that as well, right?
Yeah, that's not so good. I mean, have you tried that with the HoloLens 2, Garry, at all?
I have, yeah.
How does the retina recognition work there?
It actually works a lot better on that, and that seems to be able to handle glasses quite well.
Because that seemed to be one of the big end enterprise buying things for the HoloLens 2 was the fact you could do authentication through Retina now, which made life much easier for people.
Yeah.
Although I noticed there is now a HoloLens 2 development edition out there, isn't there?
There is, yes.
For $3,500 off your US dollars.
Yep. Not bad actually, compared to the old development edition, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes with $500 of Azure credit. You get 3 months of Unity, 3 months of, I can't pronounce it, Pyrix, the add-in. So yeah, if you're a VR AR developer, it's pretty good actually. But of course, US only for the time being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a shame really, because it's one of those things that I'd love to think, oh well, I'll get the developer edition and do some stuff on it, but I just know I wouldn't. It's a very specialist niche that, and there's no way that as a hobbyist, even if you're a professional developer but doing AR as a hobby, you could justify that. Yeah,
and also there's other problems too. I mean that particular edition, you don't get the Dynamics 365 remote assist as well, which is again one of the really interesting things in the HoloLens 2. I mean, it's a whole load of sort of, in fact, many ways, I guess perhaps a bit like the Surface Duo, in that it's a whole lot of ways of demonstrating how tech could work. So it's a shame not to be able to plug. I'm not sure how many are actually out in the field at the moment, HoloLens 2s. I know there's been a few issues with quality and supply, and I've got some friends who work in that industry, and they've had a lot of problems sourcing ones that have worked consistently. Let's put it that way.
Sounds a familiar story sometimes with some of the Microsoft.
Yeah. Issues with screens and things, which one of the solutions is to basically switch it back into HoloLens 1 mode apparently, and then things start to work better. So there's some funny things going on there. Yeah, it's and it's a funny market now, isn't it? Because there's what's the competition for that kind of thing? Because you had was it Magic Leap, and they've kind of taken a different direction a little bit. And I mean, I wonder if it's perhaps, we'll see more of the Google Glass type devices where rather than having a full-on AR experience, you simply have cue cards and things on. You have a camera that will show someone back at base what you're seeing, and then maybe cue cards that appear overlaid, but it's less aware of the world around it.
Yeah, possibly. There's so much. It's such an interesting technology with the AR stuff, and I still use my HoloLens for setting multiple screens up, but I just using it to recreational, playing around with it really, and I've not got a business case for it, but it's so close to being a consumer technology, but it isn't yet.
If I was a gambling person, I'd say Microsoft will probably give up in about 2 or 3 years, and then shortly after that, Apple will innovate and create an AR device which everyone thinks is wonderful.
And they invented it, and the HoloLens is all beyond the shelves of history, along with next to the Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I'm wrong there, because certainly the HoloLens 2 is a great device compared to the HoloLens 1. It feels more. Although I do feel like the HoloLens 2 is the version 1. The original HoloLens is more the prototype for developers to play with.
I mean, HoloLens 2 is in use in a lot of places. There's a lot of, particularly universities, a lot of medical research. They're using HoloLens 2 a lot. So
yeah, it's a good device. It would be good to see one perhaps coming in a bit cheaper next time round.
Yeah, maybe. I think I'll stick to buying a Raspberry Pi 400 for now, though.
Yeah, you can get that for £70, including your finest VAT.
Yeah. So I think that'll be where, and I will be taking I'll be looking to somewhere to stick my Raspberry Pi onto this thing. And I'm going to try and find an old Spectrum RAM pack and see if I can.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, what a great idea.
Cool. That would work. That would be really cool.
That would look great. Although, I mean, the sad thing we're doing that kind of thing is you tend to think, oh, I'm just going to have to crack this open, and then there might be something that works in here still. And whereas certainly my old TI cases, they are very, very, very scrapped now. So, although to be fair, let's face it, most RAM packs will probably be scrapped now as well. They weren't the most long-lived of things, were they?
Yeah, well, the microdrive is probably a good candidate, because the microdrives never worked properly when they were brand new. So the chances of working 30 odd years later is pretty remote.
Well, yeah, it's interesting actually. I mean, one of the uses of the Pi I've seen, so we're going back to retro stuff now, aren't we? But one of the really interesting uses of the Pi I've seen is them being programmed up to act as devices. So, for example, on my TI-99, I used to get a colossal great expansion box, which would come with disk drives and 32 kilobytes of memory and RS-232, all that stuff on huge, great cards. And of course, what someone's done is they've put all of that onto, an SD card image, and basically you then run a Pi, which you connect to your TI-99, and it behaves for all intents and purposes as the expansion box. So all the stuff is there, and I think, and I've seen that done for other retro computers where the Pi is effectively an inexpensive way of emulating all kinds of hardware, because of course you've got the wonderful, you got the USB outs obviously, but you've also got the GPIO stuff as well, so you can do all kinds of things with it, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah. I think so. Maybe maybe it's people working on lockdown projects. That's I think I've got an idea to do with mine, and that other people will come up with some good ideas.
And we should also obviously point out other small Tinkerer computers are available, but the Pi 4 is really good.
Yeah, well,
I was talking about tinkering things. I was thinking about Ian the other day. I got through a box of goodies from a company called Shelly. I don't know if you've come across them.
I have, yes, yeah.
They're basically Wi-Fi switches and Wi-Fi sensors, and they had a temperature and humidity sensor. I thought that would be perfect for Ian stuff, because the clever thing about these, I mean, I suspect they're just ESP chips under the skin, but they're really well configured, and the app for setting them up is really easy. So I've got sort of temperature sensors, switches, little micro switches you can put behind a socket. The only problem with them at the moment is for the UK is that they require neutral lines, which is a bit of a pain. But they are going to do a version of the dimmer without a neutral in the new year, which should be very good. But they've got some really cool stuff coming out. Really inexpensive and very neat and small, so definitely some people might want to have a look at if they're in the home automation side of things, because it certainly makes setting up those sort of things a lot easier than building your own.
And the I don't know whether I mentioned this, I don't know you on the show when we talked about the SwitchBot that I've been playing with, but I've got a SwitchBot thermometer and hydrometer. Is it hydrometer for humidity? It's a combined device. Anyway, I put that in the greenhouse, and it's still on the initial 2 AAA batteries, whereas the other one I had is sort of chewed through multiple sets of batteries. So I'm really impressed with that. It never drops out. It's right at the other end of the garden. It has a little hub, which I've got on the desk here. That's the hub, and the sensor is right at the other side of the garden and never drops, and it works brilliantly. So very impressed with that. Plug play. Two AAA batteries, and it's all working. Yeah, so I've got constant monitoring of that. Because
the great thing is that it's not using Wi-Fi as such, so you wouldn't get anywhere near as big battery drain as you would with something like the Shelly devices. Although I have to say I'm impressed with their battery usage as well. I've got a temperature sensor which has been sitting in one of the bedrooms now for about 2 months, and it's not even dropped 1% on its battery. So very impressed with that. Uses very strange batteries, which I've never come across before, but.
Well, that keeps my I keep my temperatures, but they're obviously falling now. So, but still got some tomatoes left, so still some more ripening. So I'm doing quite well. That'll help me for the planning for next year. So I think that's just about all the time we've got for this week. Garry, it was great to have you back on. I hope we get you back on soon as well. And,
I hope so.
Hopefully you can keep following. We can keep following. In fact, where can we find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, iPaysano, which is growing amazingly rapidly since I'm not posting anything on there at the moment, but I will be putting some more videos up there. So that's on there. You can find me on Twitter at Garry with 2 R's WMA, and that would point you to everything else I do.
Excellent. And Richard, where can we find you with your Pi 400?
You can find me on Twitter being very boring about SD cards at Richard_Speed.
Excellent stuff. Well, I'm at iStixel on Twitter. So thanks again, Richard. Thanks, Garry. We'll hopefully see you both soon. We'll be back same place, same time next week. I'll see you then.
Take care.
Cheerio.